My name is Kelly. I married Tom when we were young and full of dreams. We were high school sweethearts, and I thought we would be happy forever. My dad, who owned a furniture factory, gave us a beautiful house as a wedding gift. 3 years later, our son Michael was born. As time went on, I focused on being the perfect housewife and mother. I kept our home clean, cooked nice meals, and made sure Michael had everything he needed. Tom worked as a sales manager, but his career wasn't going as well as he hoped. One night, he came home very frustrated and angry. He slammed his fist on the kitchen table and said, "I can't take this anymore. I'm working so hard for barely any money." I tried to stay calm and asked him what he wanted me to do. Tom's face lit up as he said, "Your dad could give me a job at his factory. You should talk to him." I was unsure because I didn't want to use our family connection, but seeing how desperate Tom was, I agreed to talk to my dad. The next day, I went to my dad's office and nervously said, "Dad, I need to ask you something. Tom isn't happy with his job. Is there a position for him at the factory?" After a moment, my dad said, "I'll give him a chance, but he'll need to prove himself like everyone else." When I told Tom the news, he was overjoyed. He picked me up and spun me around, saying, "You're amazing, Kelly. This is going to change everything for us." And for a while, it did. Tom started earning more money, and our financial worries lessened. But as one problem faded, another one appeared. My relationship with Tom's mother, Helen. Helen was very protective of Tom and didn't like me. She would drop by unannounced, criticize how I kept the house, and demand my attention. One afternoon, while I was cooking dinner, Helen burst in and said, "Kelly, I need you to take me shopping right now." I was frustrated and replied, "Helen, I'm in the middle of cooking. Can it wait until tomorrow?" She glared at me and said, "Are you saying my needs aren't important, considering everything I've done for this family?" I held back my anger, knowing it would only make things worse. "Of course not," I said. "Just give me a few minutes to finish up here." As I drove Helen to the mall, she complained about my driving, my cooking, and pretty much everything else. I couldn't help but wonder how my life had turned out this way. I was capable and smart, but here I was trying to please everyone else while my own dreams were forgotten. One frustrating afternoon, Helen came into our house unannounced, as usual. "Kelly," she called, her voice grating on my nerves. "I'm hungry. Make me something to eat." I bit my tongue and left the laundry to go to the kitchen. As I cooked, Helen sat at the table, criticizing everything I did. "You're using too much oil," she said, "and cut those vegetables smaller. Can't you cook properly?" When I finally set the meal in front of her, I hoped she would eat quickly and leave. But to my surprise, she packed up all the food and said, "I'll be taking this with me. I have bridge club tonight, and this will be good for snacks." I stared at her shocked. "Helen, that was supposed to be our dinner." She shrugged and said, "You can always make more. It's not like you have anything better to do." After she left, I sat down, feeling defeated. I glanced at the clock and realized I had less than an hour to make another meal before Tom came home. When Tom arrived, he found me frantically cooking. "What's going on?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Why isn't dinner ready?" I told him what had happened with his mother, hoping he'd understand. Instead, Tom's face darkened. "Mom was here, and you didn't make her feel welcome," he said angrily. "Kelly, you know how important family is to me. You should have been more accommodating." "Accommodating?" I repeated, stunned. "Tom, she took our dinner and treats me like a servant." Tom shook his head, annoyed. "You're exaggerating. Mom just wants to feel loved and appreciated. Is that too much to ask?" As we ate the rushed meal in silence, I felt a growing distance between us. Tom, who used to be my high school sweetheart and closest friend, now felt like a stranger. One evening, Tom came home from work in a bad mood. His face was red with anger as he slammed the front door. "Kelly," Tom yelled, "your father is a tyrant. He humiliates people and uses them like pawns in his little game." I was shocked. My father had always been fair and kind. What happened? I asked carefully. Tom's eyes were blazing with anger. "I stood up for an employee today because your father was treating him unfairly. And you know what your precious daddy did? He fired me on the spot." This didn't sound like my father at all. "There must be a mistake," I said. "Let me talk to Dad and hear his side of the story." "No," Tom shouted, making me flinch. "You will not talk to your father or your mother. They no longer exist for us. Do you understand?" Trembling, I nodded, too shocked and scared to argue. In the days that followed, Tom found another job and started earning well again. But the incident had changed something deep in our relationship. The warmth and love I once felt for him were replaced by fear and resentment. As the years went by and our son Michael grew up, he often asked about his grandparents, but Tom would shut down any conversation about them. "You have one grandmother," he would say firmly. "My mother. That's all you need to know." As Michael prepared to leave for college in another city, I felt a mix of pride and sadness. My baby was growing up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing the only ally I had in the house. Over the next few years, my life fell into a dull routine. I catered to Tom's every wish and endured Helen's constant criticism. Without Michael around, their treatment of me became even harsher. One afternoon, as I was scrubbing the kitchen floor with Helen watching me closely, the phone rang. I reached for it, but Helen grabbed it and said, "I'll answer it. You focus on cleaning that floor. I can still see spots." I gritted my teeth and went back to cleaning. But I couldn't help but overhear Helen's part of the conversation. "Yes, this is the residence of Kelly." "Who, her father?" "I'm sorry, but Kelly isn't available. Please don't call again." My head snapped up. "Wait," I called out, but Helen had already hung up. "That was your father," she said coldly. "I told him not to call you again. You should thank me for protecting this family from those toxic people." I felt a rush of anger and frustration. "You had no right to do that," I said, my voice shaking. "He's my father. I should have been allowed to speak to him." Helen's eyes narrowed. "You ungrateful little." Just then, Tom walked in. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Helen immediately put on a hurt expression. "Oh, Tom, your wife is being so disrespectful to me after all I do for this family." Tom turned to me, his face dark with anger. "Is this true, Kelly? Are you disrespecting my mother?" I opened my mouth to explain, but no words came out. I realized with a sinking feeling that it didn't matter what I said, Tom would always side with Helen. A year had passed since that phone call from my father. Life continued in its stifling routine, with Tom and Helen's control over me growing tighter every day. Then, on a crisp autumn morning, everything changed. The phone rang while I was preparing breakfast. Tom was in the shower, and Helen hadn't yet arrived for her daily inspection of my housekeeping. For once, I could answer without interference. "Hello?" I said tentatively. "Kelly, is that you?" The voice on the other end was familiar but distant. It was my father's voice. "Kelly, it's your mother. She's very ill. The doctors don't think she has much time left. She needs you. We both do." Just then, I heard the bathroom door open. Tom would be down any minute. "I'll try, Dad. I promise I'll try," I whispered before quickly hanging up. When Tom entered the kitchen, I struggled to keep myself composed. "Who was that on the phone?" he asked suspiciously. I took a deep breath. It was my father. "My mother is very ill. She's dying. I need to go see her." Tom's face hardened. "Absolutely not. We've been through this, Kelly. Your parents don't exist for us anymore." I felt something snap inside me. For the first time in years, I stood up to him. "I'm going with or without your permission. She's my mother, and I won't let her die without saying goodbye." Tom's jaw clenched. "Fine. One day. That's all you get. And then you come back home where you belong." I nodded, unable to speak. One day was better than nothing. With trembling hands, I called my son Michael to tell him what was happening. To my surprise and relief, he immediately offered to come with me. The next morning, Michael and I set off for my childhood home. When we arrived, my father met us at the door. He looked older than I remembered, with deep lines etched into his face from grief. Without saying a word, he pulled me into a tight embrace. He led us to my mother's room. She lay in bed, pale and frail, but her eyes brightened when she saw me. "Kelly," she whispered, reaching out a trembling hand. "My baby girl." I rushed to her side and took her hand in mine. "Mom, I'm here. I'm so sorry. Can you ever forgive me?" She smiled weakly. "There's nothing to forgive, sweetheart. I'm just glad you're here now." We spent the day by her bedside, sharing memories and catching up. As the sun began to set, my mother's breathing grew labored. She squeezed my hand and looked into my eyes. "Kelly," she said softly, "promise me you'll really live your life. Don't let anyone cage your spirit again." Tears streamed down my face as I nodded. "I promise, Mom. I promise." She smiled one last time, then closed her eyes. Her hand went limp in mine. She was gone. Suddenly, my phone started ringing incessantly. I knew without looking that it was Tom. I answered the call and moved to the hallway for privacy. Tom's voice was sharp with anger. "Where the hell are you, Kelly? You were supposed to be back hours ago." "Tom, I can't leave yet," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "My mother just passed away. I need to stay for the funeral." "Absolutely not," he roared. "I told you one day, and that's all you get. If you're not back by tomorrow, don't bother coming back at all." His words felt like a threat and a promise all at once. For a moment, I was tempted to rush back to the life I knew, but then I remembered my mother's last words urging me to live fully. "Fine," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm staying." I ended the call before he could respond. My heart pounded. For the first time in our marriage, I had defied Tom, and it was both terrifying and liberating. The next few days were a blur of grief and preparations. On the day of the funeral, as we stood around my mother's grave, my phone rang again. Tom's number flashed on the screen. Without thinking, I hit the speaker button to silence it quickly. Tom's voice burst forth, loud and angry. "Kelly, this is your last chance. If you don't come home right now, I swear I'll come and drag you back myself. You ungrateful filth. After everything I've done for you." Tom's voice screamed through the phone before I quickly ended the call, my face burning with shame and anger. The people around us looked shocked, and Michael's face was a mask of fury. My father looked more concerned than anything else. He pulled me aside as soon as the service ended. "Kelly," he said gently, "we need to talk." We walked to a quiet corner of the cemetery, and my father took a deep breath. "Sweetheart, there's something you need to know about Tom. Something I should have told you years ago." I listened in stunned silence as my father revealed the truth about why Tom had really left the company. It wasn't because he had stood up for an employee. It was because my father had caught him stealing money from the company and manipulating prices to pocket the difference. "I fired him to protect the company and our clients," my father explained. "I didn't tell you because I thought you loved him and I didn't want to come between you. But now, seeing how he speaks to you and what your life has become, I can't stay silent anymore." I felt as if the ground had opened up beneath me. All these years I had believed Tom's lies, allowed him to cut me off from my family, and endured his and Helen's emotional abuse, all based on falsehoods. "There's more," my father continued, his voice grave. "I recently heard from a friend that Tom's company is under investigation. There are discrepancies. Kelly, I think he might be up to his old tricks again." As the full impact of his words hit me, I felt a strange mix of despair and liberation. The life I had known was falling apart, but from its ashes, I saw a chance for a new beginning. The day after the funeral, my father, Michael, and I returned to my house. To our surprise, the place was bustling with activity. Helen's friends were milling about, and the smell of food wafted from the open windows. We walked in to find a full-blown party in progress. Helen, holding a glass of wine, spotted us first. Her eyes narrowed as she took in my father and Michael. "Well, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're late, Kelly. My birthday celebration started an hour ago," Helen snapped. I was momentarily stunned. With everything that had happened recently, I had completely forgotten about Helen's birthday. Before I could respond, she thrust a dirty rag into my hands. "Don't just stand there," she ordered. "Start cleaning up these tables. They won't wipe themselves." My father, who had been silently observing, suddenly erupted. "How dare you speak to my daughter that way?" he thundered, making the room fall silent. "She's not a servant. She's a grown woman who deserves respect." Helen laughed derisively. "Respect? She gave up any right to respect when she married my son. Her family is Tom and me. You're nothing to her anymore." I watched in disbelief as my father and Helen argued, their voices rising. The party guests looked uncomfortable, unsure whether to leave or stay. Suddenly, Tom burst into the room. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded, his eyes locking onto me. "Kelly, why aren't you serving the guests? And what are they doing here?" He gestured angrily toward my father and Michael. Something inside me snapped. Years of pent-up frustration and anger poured out. "No, Tom," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I'm not serving anyone. I'm not cleaning up, and I'm not staying silent anymore." The room fell deathly quiet. Even Helen seemed at a loss for words. "I know the truth, Tom," I continued, pulling out the divorce papers I had hastily prepared. I know why you really left my father's company. I'm done. I want a divorce." For a moment, Tom looked like he might lunge at me, but then, perhaps realizing he was outnumbered, he deflated. "Fine," he snarled. "Take your divorce. But don't think you'll get a penny from me." I couldn't help but laugh. "This house is mine, Tom. My father gave it to us as a wedding gift. Remember, you're the one who needs to leave." Tom and Helen left shortly after, casting venomous glares our way as they went. When the door closed behind them, I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. Michael, who had been quietly watching everything unfold, finally spoke up. "Mom, why didn't you tell me things were so bad?" "I'm sorry, Michael," I said. "I thought I was protecting you, but I realize now I was only teaching you the wrong lessons about love and respect." In the weeks that followed, my life changed dramatically. The divorce proceedings began, and I focused on rebuilding my life. My father, true to his word, stood by me every step of the way. One afternoon, as we sat in his study discussing the future, he brought up a topic I hadn't expected. "Kelly," he began, his voice gentle but serious, "I've been thinking. I'm not getting any younger, and the factory needs new blood. How would you feel about coming to work with me?" I blinked in surprise. "Me? But Dad, I don't know anything about running a business." He chuckled. "Neither did I when I started. You're smart, Kelly. You can learn. Besides, it's about time you had a chance to spread your wings." Over the next few months, I immersed myself in learning the business. My father was a patient teacher, guiding me through the details of running a furniture factory. I discovered a passion for design and innovation that I never knew I had. Meanwhile, the divorce dragged on. True to form, Tom fought me every step of the way. He contested the ownership of the house and even tried to turn Michael against me. In the end, justice prevailed. I was awarded the house and substantial financial compensation for the years of emotional abuse. Tom, facing charges for his fraudulent activities, found himself deep in debt and unable to hold senior positions. As for Helen, she faded into the background, her influence over my life finally broken. The last I heard, she had moved in with a distant relative. Her social circle diminished after the truth about Tom came out. 3 years passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. One Sunday morning, my father called me into his office. His face was solemn as he gestured for me to sit. "Kelly," he said, his voice heavy with emotion, "I'm not well. The doctors don't think I have much time left." The world seemed to spin around me. "Dad, no," I whispered, reaching for his hand. He squeezed my fingers gently. "It's okay, sweetheart," he said softly. "I've had a good life. Now I can go knowing that you're strong, that you're free, and that you'll be okay." Tears streamed down my face as he continued. "I'm leaving everything to you, Kelly. The business, the house, everything. You've more than proven yourself. I know you'll take good care of it all." In the weeks that followed, we spent as much time together as possible. My father's condition worsened rapidly, but his spirit remained strong. He passed away peacefully in his sleep, leaving behind a legacy that I was now responsible for. News of my father's passing and my inheritance spread quickly through our small town. I was still adjusting to my new reality when an unexpected visitor arrived at my doorstep. On a crisp autumn afternoon, I heard the doorbell ring. Opening the door, I was shocked to see Tom standing there, holding a bouquet of flowers and looking apologetic. "Kelly," he said, his voice softer than I had heard it in years, "I'm so sorry about your father. May I come in?" Reluctantly, I stepped aside to let him enter. We stood in the foyer, an awkward silence hanging between us. Finally, Tom spoke up. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Kelly, about us, about our life together. I know I made terrible mistakes, but I've changed. My mother passed away last month. She was always the one who came between us. Now there's nothing stopping us from being happy together again." As I opened my mouth to respond, I heard a car pulling up in the driveway. A moment later, the front door opened, and a tall, distinguished-looking man walked in. "Kelly, darling, I'm home," he called out, then stopped short when he saw Tom. Tom looked between us, confusion and anger dawning on his face. "Who the hell is this?" Tom demanded. The man stepped forward, extending his hand to Tom. "I'm David, Kelly's husband." "And you are?" Tom ignored the outstretched hand, his face contorting with rage. "Husband? What the hell, Kelly? You were married? You traitor." David's expression hardened. He stepped between Tom and me, his voice low and dangerous. I suggest you leave now and never speak to my wife that way again, David said firmly. Tom lunged forward, but David was quicker. He grabbed Tom by the arm and guided him to the door. This is your only warning, David said calmly. Stay away from Kelly. If you ever come near her or insult her again, you'll regret it. With that, David shut the door, and Tom's angry face disappeared as the sound of screeching tires faded away. David turned to me, his face softening with concern. Are you okay, love? I nodded, stepping into his embrace. I'm fine. I'm just glad you're home. Looking up at him with a smile, I added, and I'm glad you waited for me after all these years. David chuckled and pressed a kiss to my forehead. I've loved you since high school, Kelly. I would have waited forever if I had to. As we stood there in each other's arms, I marveled at how life had come full circle. David and I had been high school sweethearts before Tom came into the picture. After my divorce, we had reconnected, and our old feelings had blossomed anew. We had married in a quiet ceremony 6 months ago, starting a new chapter in both our lives. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Michael. Mom, great news. Jessica's pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother. In the months that followed, life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Michael and his wife Jessica moved back to our city, eager to be close to family as they prepared for their baby's arrival. They joined us at the factory, bringing fresh ideas and energy to the business. You cheated on me while I was on a business trip, didn't you? We're getting a divorce. Give the house to my parents and leave right now. Jackson's voice boomed through the phone, a storm of accusation and anger. But I wasn't taken aback. I knew he was grasping at straws, trying to find a reason to blame me for his own failings. I already sold it, I replied coolly, feeling his emotions teeter on the other end. He thought he could outwit me, but he underestimated my intuition. I simmered with fury initially, but his feeble attempt at deception only made me smirk. It was my turn now. This is the tale of how my deceitful husband tried to manipulate me and how I outmaneuvered him. My name is Olivia, a 28-year-old working mom. I've been at the college store job since I graduated from junior college at 20. Jackson, 2 years my senior, now toils away in an office at a construction firm. But when we first crossed paths 3 years ago, he was adrift, jobless. He'd abandoned his first post-college job, claiming it wasn't right for him. Since then, he drifted between gigs, often idling. That's when he swept me off my feet, proposing in mere months. Okay, but there's a condition, I stated firmly, noting the worry etched on Jackson's face. What is it? He asked, apprehension creeping into his voice. You need to find a stable job. Otherwise, marriage is out of the question. We need to think about our future, I explained, my tone resolute. Oh, come on. Of course, but you're working, so there's no rush, right? Jackson attempted to brush off the seriousness of the situation. My parents would worry if I married a man without a job. Find one before we get married, I insisted, my gaze unwavering. Seeing my stern expression, Jackson sighed in resignation. All right, I'll find one. Then you'll marry me. Yes, and so it'll be, I affirmed, though uncertainty lingered in my mind. Reluctantly, Jackson embarked on his job hunt, eventually securing a position in an office at a construction company. We tied the knot. Back then, I viewed Jackson as somewhat careless about money and work. He'd quit jobs impulsively and didn't always grasp the gravity of financial matters, even in the context of marriage. Yet he was receptive when I spoke seriously. I believed that after marriage, I could guide him, fill in his gaps, and in turn, he would complement my weaknesses. Together, we'd form a strong partnership. But life proved to be more complicated than I anticipated. Jackson's apparent disregard for financial matters appeared to be a trait passed down from his parents. Around a year into our marriage, during our search for a house and discussions about securing a mortgage, Jackson dropped a bombshell. I might not be able to get a loan, he disclosed casually, leaving me stunned. What? I exclaimed, seeking clarification. Nonchalantly, he explained, I looked into it, and because I hadn't been at my job for long, I might need a guarantor for the loan. The only person I could ask is my dad, but he's dealing with significant gambling debts, so he probably can't be a guarantor. His revelation left me dumbfounded, especially with the contract and the real estate agent right in front of us. Yet Jackson seemed unfazed. If we put the house in your name, it'll be fine, right? You've been at your job forever, so you can get the loan. We'll both pay it off. It's just a formality, he suggested casually. That's not the point. Why didn't you discuss this with me? This is a big deal for me too. I'm not even prepared with the paperwork, I retorted, frustration bubbling within me. Though he apologized, his contrition felt hollow, lacking sincerity. Despite my urge to argue, I refrained from escalating the situation, considering the already prepared contract and the presence of the agent. Reluctantly, I hastily gathered the necessary documents, such as my income statement, for the loan application. In a spur-of-the-moment decision, I impulsively bought the house under my name. As I hurried to finalize the paperwork, a wave of anxiety washed over me. Could I truly envision a future with this man? Perhaps I should have simply put a halt to the proceedings instead of rushing to prepare the documents. Adding to my mounting anxiety was the looming issue with my in-laws. The other day, I had a talk with Dad. Jackson began one evening. He mentioned that he might lose the house due to the debts I mentioned earlier. He's considering moving in with us. That's all right, isn't it? What? Why would you even consider that? I responded sharply, hoping to convey the seriousness of the situation, but Jackson seemed unfazed. Well, he's in a tough spot. My brother is single, but he's working overseas. I'm Dad's only option. Shouldn't we discuss this properly? Maybe he can stay with us temporarily until he finds another place, but committing to having him live with us permanently is a major decision, Jackson reasoned, his expression troubled. You're just trying to avoid the issue. If he stays, we can split the living expenses. You're always complaining about money, he countered. You mean the money you never contribute? You promised we'd split the mortgage, but it's only coming out of my paycheck. You haven't paid your share. In marriage, finances are shared. It's not just your money, it's ours. It's only deducted from your account because the house is in your name. Stop being so self-centered, I admonished, frustration simmering beneath my words. My frustration boiled over, and I raised my voice, demanding answers. Jackson's response was simply, I hate talking about money, before abruptly leaving the room. These clashes became all too common, with Jackson consistently brushing off my concerns and retreating, leaving issues unresolved. Yet despite his aversion to discussing finances, Jackson wasn't entirely idle when it came to his family's predicaments. His role in construction site administration brought him into frequent contact with real estate contracts, leading him to consult a specific agency about the potential sale of his family home and the steps involved in securing the best deal. I've been considering selling the house for a good price, but I'm unsure about the process. What steps should I take if I decide to sell down the line? This topic was a recurring theme in our conversations. It was somewhat reassuring to know that I wasn't alone in contemplating these matters. However, the persistent notion of his family living with us post-sale always lingered in the back of my mind, causing unease. Jackson started holding meetings with real estate agencies and my parents-in-law behind my back, and his weekends away from home became more frequent. Eventually, he had to embark on a business trip that would keep him away for several months. The project required him to stay near the construction site until its completion. At the time, I didn't realize it, but the power struggle between us had already commenced. A few days after Jackson's departure, I decided to treat myself to tea after a shopping trip. As I entered the cafe, I was greeted by a familiar face. Recollecting past encounters, I recognized him as someone Jackson had once brought home. He worked at a real estate company, and Jackson had mentioned him as Samuel, a young employee who was relatively new to the company with less than a year under his belt. Oh, hello. You've been to our house before, right? I greeted him with a hint of recognition. Yes, I apologize for dropping by unannounced and even staying for a meal. My apologies, Samuel replied sheepishly. No worries. I should have been more hospitable, I assured him, gesturing for us to sit down and have tea together. Samuel proved to be very friendly and surprisingly sensible, especially considering his youth. We engaged in pleasant conversation over tea before parting ways. At that moment, I could have fathomed what would follow. Little did I know, this seemingly innocuous encounter would later be twisted into an accusation of infidelity. It happened when Jackson confronted me. You cheated on me while I was away, didn't you? We're getting a divorce. Give the house to my parents and leave now. His words hit me like a bolt of lightning. The first thought that crossed my mind was disbelief. Could it be true? Had Jackson spread rumors about me cheating, all to justify a divorce? The shocking revelation came from an unexpected source. Samuel, the very man Jackson falsely accused me of having an affair with. The day after our tea, Samuel showed up at my doorstep unannounced. I apologized for the sudden visit. About yesterday, Jackson asked me to get close to you, he confessed, his words catching me off guard. Shocked and confused, I invited him inside and listened intently as he unraveled his tale. Jackson had orchestrated a deceitful plan to frame me for cheating in order to expedite a divorce. He had enlisted Samuel to manufacture evidence against me. There were two underlying motives behind Jackson's scheme. Firstly, he coveted our house and sought to wrest it from my possession. Concerned about his parents' property, he believed it would be simpler to reside there with them. However, my objection to the arrangement thwarted his plan, leading him to concoct a scheme to evict me and claim the house for himself. Secondly, Jackson was engaged in an extramarital affair. Under the guise of discussing matters with my parents-in-law, he spent weekends with his mistress. Consumed by his infatuation, he viewed me, his wife, as an impediment to his happiness. By framing me for infidelity, he aimed to secure financial compensation in the divorce settlement. I always underestimated Jackson's intelligence, but he certainly proved to be cunning in the worst ways. Despicable, I muttered under my breath, my disdain evident. Samuel offered his apologies, but I had no intention of aiding Jackson in his deceitful scheme. I refused to be manipulated for such nefarious purposes. Thus, I feigned cooperation while secretly plotting to outmaneuver him. Taking advantage of Samuel's real estate expertise, I listened as he provided various suggestions. Eventually, he proposed a bold idea. You should sell the house while Jackson is away on his trip. When I finally uttered the words, I sold it, Jackson's reaction was a mixture of confusion and disbelief. What? He managed to sputter, clearly at a loss for words. Seeing his stunned expression, I resolved to twist the knife further. I recounted everything I learned from Samuel, including the recordings he provided. You were attempting to fabricate evidence to make it appear as though I was having an affair with him. If we divorce now, I can pursue alimony and court proceedings, I explained calmly, watching Jackson's bewildered expression as he repeated, Why? Why? But I had another revelation to share. You might not have realized, but Samuel isn't just an ordinary employee. He's actually the son of the company's CEO. Jackson's shock was palpable. What? How could I have missed that? He exclaimed, his confusion deepening. It was clear he had underestimated the gravity of the situation. Do you not realize that Samuel shares the same last name as the CEO? How could you overlook that? I questioned, incredulous at his obliviousness. Well, Samuel's last name isn't exactly rare, Jackson attempted to defend himself weakly. Wait, are you serious? He added, his incredulity growing. No, I'm serious, I asserted firmly, noting the shock in Jackson's expression. Samuel's company held significant importance to Jackson as one of his key clients. Additionally, they had provided crucial assistance with his family home matters. If news of his deceit reached the company's boss, Jackson would undoubtedly find himself in serious trouble. As it turned out, Samuel had already reported the situation. Hey, come on. All right, I'll look into it. If you're lying, I'll find out soon enough, Jackson responded before abruptly ending the call. It didn't take long for him to realize the gravity of the situation and the irreversible damage he had caused. Subsequently, the real estate company owned by Samuel's father refused to engage in any business dealings with Jackson or offer him advice regarding his family home. With no other options, Jackson was forced to return to his family home after concluding his business trip. Meanwhile, since I had sold my house, Samuel had graciously introduced me to an affordable apartment, leaving me with no concerns. As I initiated the divorce proceedings, Jackson persistently reached out, pleading for forgiveness. I'm sorry, Olivia. Please forgive me, he implored. It's too late now. You attempted to manipulate someone into trapping me. Why should I believe anything you say? I retorted, my resolve unyielding. Don't say that. Once we're divorced, you can marry that other woman, right? That's what you wanted, isn't it? I questioned, hoping to reaffirm his intentions. Yes, but she apparently had someone else she liked and dumped me. What a pathetic story, Jackson admitted with a hint of bitterness. Even if that's the case, don't expect me to welcome you back with open arms, I responded firmly, my patience wearing thin. With a sigh, I ended the call. Despite my efforts to keep my current address undisclosed, Jackson's relentless barrage of calls persisted. Each time, he'd plead, Don't leave me. Help me, I'll be a good husband, his promises ringing hollow in my ears. I grew increasingly exasperated with his empty pleas. Once the divorce was finalized, I resolved to sever all ties, deleting his number, blocking him on WhatsApp, and cutting off communication entirely. Yet, the unwelcome appeals didn't end with Jackson. Even my mother-in-law reached out, begging, "Please, Olivia, we'll be lost without you. It's not the house we wanted, it's you, isn't it?" "But there's no house left," I pointed out, feeling a mix of frustration and disbelief. "We didn't just desire the house. We're not that heartless. Come back, and you'll understand," she urged, her tone pleading. "You were after the money, weren't you?" I accused, feeling a surge of resentment. "That's not true. You're being unfair. You tried to pressure me into living with you, and when I refused, Jackson attempted to manipulate me to gain an advantage in the divorce," she countered defensively. "I can't trust someone like that. It's evident that your motives revolve around money," I asserted firmly, refusing to yield to Jackson's pleas. As I continued to reject his advances, my father-in-law dialed my number, his tone dripping with arrogance. "Isn't it your duty as a daughter-in-law to show some respect to my wife? Are you seriously saying no? Isn't this all because of the debt you accumulated?" he demanded, his voice growing increasingly strident. With each word, his accusations stung, and when I responded with equal resolve, his tone turned venomous. "You heartless woman, abandoning your mother-in-law in her time of need and shifting blame onto her. I'll make you pay for your cruelty," he bellowed into the phone, the volume causing my ears to ring. Unable to tolerate his threats any longer, I abruptly ended the call and, clutching the recorded audio as evidence, sought counsel from my lawyer. It transpired that my father-in-law's menacing words could be construed as a threat. Armed with this knowledge, I informed Jackson that I would pursue legal action if he refused to consent to the divorce. In a state of panic, Jackson reluctantly agreed to the divorce, allowing me to sever ties with his tumultuous family once and for all. With the legal proceedings finalized, I found solace in the newfound freedom from their oppressive influence. However, the consequences of his actions soon caught up with Jackson. His reputation at work suffered, resulting in diminished responsibilities and a significant loss of trust from his superiors. Furthermore, the unresolved debt issue forced him to sell his family home at a depreciated value, leaving him and his parents to reside in a modest apartment. With his reduced role at work, Jackson's income dwindled, compounded by the financial strain of providing support to his dependent parents. The burden of alimony payments only exacerbated his financial woes. These unfortunate circumstances came to my attention through Samuel, who remained confident despite the tumultuous events. It was through Samuel's suggestion that I found a potential opportunity to leverage my customer service skills from my previous job at a clothing store. He proposed a position in his company's HR department, offering a chance for me to rebuild my life on my own terms. After discovering an opening that required strong communication skills, I deliberated extensively and sought advice before ultimately accepting the position at the real estate company. This decision marked a significant shift in my career path. Throughout this transition, Samuel and I maintained our close bond, which gradually blossomed into a romantic relationship. A year into our courtship, we exchanged vows and embarked on our journey as husband and wife, with me assuming the role of the future company president's spouse. The irony wasn't lost on me. The two individuals Jackson attempted to portray as entangled in an affair had ultimately found love and married each other. As I integrated into my new family, which included my in-laws, I was met with warmth and acceptance. Together with Samuel, I envisioned crafting a fulfilling and harmonious life, building upon the foundation of our shared love and mutual respect. I got married to a man who liked me even though I was fragile and shy. I thought we were happy, but while I was in the hospital, my husband met a beautiful divorced woman. He decided to leave me, saying I didn't work and wanted $800 a month as compensation. He went ahead with the divorce coldly. My name's Michelle, and I quietly work in an office at a real estate company. I've never been particularly interested in real estate or office work. Since I was a kid, I've been physically weak and sometimes end up in the hospital because of my internal organs, though it's not life-threatening. People were worried if I could work, especially with my health issues, but my parents suggested I try office work. I've been managing fine, even with occasional hospital stays. I've been doing well at my job, and my colleagues understand my situation. I met my husband Tony at a social gathering set up by a friend, kind of like a group blind date. I wasn't sure about romance because I thought my fragility would be a problem for anyone. I didn't date much, and before I knew it, I was over 30. My friend encouraged me, saying, "You should find someone who understands you, Michelle. Your condition doesn't affect your daily life much. Let's stay positive." So she invited me to an event. I didn't think it would work out. There were 3 men, one of whom I liked, but he seemed interested in another woman. I didn't feel particularly attractive, and the other women there seemed prettier. I had given up on finding someone there, but then Tony, who later became my husband, approached me. He was thoughtful, offering me soft drinks since I didn't drink much. But as I listened to him, I realized he wasn't the one I wanted to be close to. I dreamed of marrying someone like a top actress. Hearing his confidence made me wonder about him and even feel a bit repelled. However, despite that, he kept talking to me. He asked, "What kind of guy do you like, Michelle? Do you want to get married?" Because I was eager to get married soon, Tony kept talking to me, showing persistence. At first, I thought he was shallow, but we exchanged contacts. Surprisingly, Tony kept contacting me frequently, even asking me out. Gradually, my feelings for him grew. However, I was still worried. Why would a man with high standards and a seemingly shallow nature be interested in someone like me? When I shared my concerns about my fragile health with a friend, they explained that guys often want to appear strong and impressive at first. Despite that, my friend said Tony really seemed to like me. Believing this, I started to see Tony differently, and we grew closer. Eventually, we got married, and our first year together was truly happy. We lived in a spacious and affordable apartment that I found. Interestingly, my health issues almost disappeared, and I didn't have to go to the hospital while I was with Tony. Maybe being with him helped improve my health. Tony was considerate, and I felt confident that marrying him was the right decision. However, after a year, I started noticing changes in Tony's attitude towards me despite my weak health. ChatGPT. I managed to do basic housework, and I always cooked meals. Tony used to praise my cooking, which made me happy. But gradually, he stopped complimenting and even started complaining about the food. He'd say things like, "Is the soup a bit bland today?" Or, "I'm not really in the mood for meat today." I'm not great at cooking, so making the same tasty meal every day is tough. But until then, he never complained. Also, I can't guess what Tony wants to eat unless he tells me. I was shocked when he said he wasn't in the mood for something. Still, I loved Tony and wanted to meet his expectations. However, his attitude towards me got worse. When he came home from work, he used to cheerfully greet me with, "I'm home. Worked hard today." But he stopped doing that and instead said, "I'm tired. I want to do something fun," showing no interest. Our habit of going out on days off also disappeared. When I suggested going somewhere, he'd coldly reply, "I'm too tired to go anywhere. If you want to go, go by yourself." His behavior seemed odd, and I started feeling my health deteriorating again. It's like my body reflected my growing anxiety. Then Tony started coming home late from work and going out with friends on his days off, saying he wanted to rest. "I'll be back soon," disregarding me entirely. This behavior went beyond just being odd. It started to breed distrust in me. At the same time, my physical condition began to resemble the times I had health issues in the past. If this continued, I would end up hospitalized again, and I wanted to avoid that. Hospital stays usually last about 2 weeks, something I'd rather avoid. So I wanted to talk to Tony about our situation. One day when he returned from an errand, I asked him honestly, "Hey, you've been acting strange, haven't you? You're cold towards me. Have you started to dislike me? If you have something to say, say it. Otherwise, I'll go crazy." But he, perhaps drunk, bluntly spoke his true feelings to me, saying, "I'm not doing anything with you. I haven't started to hate you, but I don't love you anymore. Are you misunderstanding something? I dated you and even married you, you know. Besides, your income is low. I'm just stressed because there's nothing fun to do." He spoke in a detached manner. His clear and blunt words left me speechless and caused deep emotional hurt. The anger and sadness that followed were overwhelming. It was as if he didn't care about me anymore. Essentially, he had reluctantly dated and married me. This reminded me of when we first met at the mixer. I realized he had his sights on another woman. When she showed interest in another man, he turned to me, the leftover one. I thought his eagerness to marry was genuine, and I was his only viable option at that time. My fears about him being frivolous and not serious about someone like me were confirmed. As these thoughts raced through my mind, my health worsened. There was one thing I wanted to correct in Tony's words, but I no longer felt the need or desire to say it. Not wanting Tony's care, I called my workplace to inform them of my impending episode and took a taxi to the hospital. After a 2-week stay, I returned home still uncertain about how to proceed with Tony. But upon my return, he said something completely unexpected. "Oh, you're back. Did you get some rest?" I was surprised. "I knew you were weak, but I didn't expect you to be hospitalized." His way of speaking showed no concern for me at all. Thinking back, he never visited me once while I was in the hospital. True, I hadn't mentioned frequent hospitalizations when we were dating, and this was my first hospitalization since we had been together. Maybe that's why he reacted this way. But his shocking statements were yet to come. "But taking it easy in the hospital, that's a nice life, huh? Earning so little and still taking time off. Naturally, your income will decrease. I don't want to continue this boring life anymore. I'm done. A wife who doesn't work is worthless. Let's get a divorce." Tony said this without any remorse. I was dumbstruck by his sudden declaration. Then he added, "Actually, I decided something while you were in the hospital. I've decided to marry this woman." He showed me a photo on his smartphone of a very beautiful woman, his new girlfriend. It confirmed what I always knew. He likes beautiful women. This woman is my childhood friend. I was surprised at how beautiful she's become when we met by chance recently. He grinned as he explained this to me. Moreover, regarding our separation, he said, "The reason for the divorce is your fault. I'm the victim because I have a wife who doesn't work. So you should pay me compensation of $800 a month. It's your punishment for using me for so long." He expected me to pay despite thinking my income was low and him, the victim. How twisted could his thinking be? I was shocked to face such a situation soon after returning from the hospital, but I quickly regained my composure and honestly thought, this means I can separate from him right away. Deep down, I had already reached this conclusion. It's best to part ways with him. But divorcing so soon after getting married. Surprisingly, I was conscious of what others would think. However, his current behavior was a wake-up call. I decided to accept his demands, so I took out the divorce papers I had prepared earlier, signed my name, and handed them to him. "All right, if you have a new fiancé, I understand. Here are the divorce papers. Sign them quickly," I said. He looked surprised for once and said, "Oh, that was quick. Sometimes you do think. Now we can get divorced." He signed the papers, grinning, and handed them back to me, saying, "Don't forget about the compensation. Start transferring it by the end of this month." Then he went back to his room. He must have been surprised. He didn't expect me to comply so easily. But I had been contemplating divorce anyway. It was just a matter of time. However, I hadn't accepted everything he said. Compensation, that's another story which he'll realize later. A week or so after moving out of the house I shared with Tony, my health was stable, and I was going about my daily life. After work one day, I checked my phone and saw over 200 missed calls from an unknown number. What? Over 200 missed calls? When I opened the history, Tony's name was listed repeatedly. Seeing this, I couldn't help but feel relieved because I knew why he had been calling. When I called him back, his panic was obvious. "Hey, I got a demand for $50,000 in compensation. That's too much, don't you think?" But how could he not understand without an explanation? "Well, you were cheating on me with your fiancé. While we were still married, right?" Was her name Hillary Johnson? "She's really beautiful, isn't she?" He was flustered when I mentioned her name. "What are you talking about? More importantly, how do you know her name?" The answer was simple. Why do I know? Because I hired a detective. Your actions were obviously suspicious, so I decided to ask for a little help. They contacted me right away, saying it was a definite case. They even showed me proof photos. According to the latest information, you had her stay over at our house just 3 days ago. Right, by the way, I filed for divorce the day before yesterday, so we were still married 3 days ago. Telling him this, he looked like he was about to explode. He had demanded compensation from me, but this was why I refused to accept that part. Detectives are amazing, but they sure cost a lot of money. When I mentioned that, he nervously asked, "That's true, but you don't have that kind of money, do you?" But that was just his misconception. Indeed, my salary as an office worker wasn't significant, but now I'm ready to reveal the truth. I wanted to counter when he called me low income, but I do have about $400,000 in rental income. The reason being, my father is the president of the real estate company. I work for the company passed down from my great-grandfather, which owns roughly 100 buildings and apartments. My father put several of those properties in my name, perhaps his way of showing love. So, the rent from those properties goes into my account. However, he always told me to do my best in my office job. Tony always assumed I was just a weak, low-income office worker but was quite shocked to learn the truth. Seriously, you should have said that earlier. He realized he had let go of a big fish. If he had treasured me, he could have had a lot of fun, but his misfortune didn't end there. So, the apartment you're living in now is actually mine. I just picked it because it was vacant. That's why there was no rent, but if you continue living there, the rent is $2,000 a month. Looks like your entire monthly salary is going to be gone. He always claimed I was low income, but his salary wasn't great either. That's why I chose one of my properties for him. Now it might be too late to tell him. And then another tragedy struck him. The beautiful fiancée, Hillary, apparently got to know the truth. It seems she was being claimed for compensation as his affair partner. And naturally, the engagement was called off, and she disappeared from Tony's life. Tony, having spent his meager salary and even borrowed money to impress Hillary, ended up with nothing in the end. It's a result of his arrogance and lack of effort, thinking he could land a big catch without trying. As a result, Tony lost his wife, his home, and his new fiancée in an instant. All that remained was his considerable debt. Finally, he said to me, "Hey, let's give it another try. You're the one for me, after all." Such a desperate statement. But without it, he would have an even more boring life than before. However, as far as I'm concerned, he no longer means anything to me. But you would say you were just with me because you had no choice, right? Don't worry about me. I'll be fine. I replied casually and decided to end the call. His calls continued, but they were so annoying that I blocked his number. Since then, he has been evicted from the apartment and lives in a shabby place, struggling with debt. He works from morning till night, but another hardship hit him. Hillary's acquaintances, tough-looking guys, found out where he lived and started threatening him. You're going to pay the compensation she's being charged with too. While their methods are forceful, what they say isn't unreasonable. After all, Hillary was deceived. Thus, Tony's debt only grew. Now he's so dispirited that no one wants anything to do with him. As for me, I'm in good health, free from major stress. The episodes have stopped, and overcoming this huge obstacle has perhaps made me mentally stronger. My office work no longer suffers, and my parents are happy. Now I focus on not stressing myself and being honest with my feelings. When asked about my next relationship, I think I'll stay away from it for a while. Work has become enjoyable, and I find it fulfilling. Before thinking about romance, I plan to travel, something I couldn't do before due to my health concerns. Get out. Your old lady smell is ruining my new house, Michaela shouted as she threw disinfectant on me during her housewarming party. Drenched and overwhelmed by the pungent smell, I felt something snap inside me. Standing up silently, I flashed a terrifying smile at Michaela and said, "Then I'll clean this up for you. After all, I built it." I went upstairs to Michaela's room to retrieve something. My name is Harmony, a 72-year-old retired confectioner. More precisely, I was a patissier who ran a cake shop until a leg injury forced me into retirement. Now, I help my son and his wife who have taken over the business and live a modest life. Harmony, you must be happy your son took over, people would say at the tea parties I occasionally attended. I brought cakes made by my son and his wife, earning praise from neighbors. Today, at the tea party, I was engrossed in conversations when a neighbor mentioned my son. I stared at my tea, lost in thought. "A shop with many memories, isn't it?" someone remarked, prompting me to reminisce. Indeed, my life had been full of ups and downs. I opened my patisserie at 35 after a decade of training in France. Upon returning, my parents opposed the idea, saying a cake shop in the countryside wouldn't work. I defied them, saying, "I'll do it my way," and opened my shop. It became popular in 6 months, becoming the talk of the town. My French-trained skills were praised, attracting customers quickly. My once opposed parents came to respect and fully support me. "Time to think of the next new creation," my husband Daniel said, supporting our cake shop while preparing for the next day. "Summer is tough for sales. Maybe a cold dessert would be a hit." That's what we were discussing when we heard the bell at the shop door. I hurried to the counter. "Welcome. I called out, only to see Michaela, my sister-in-law, who appeared 2 years older than me. She was always flamboyant, having moved from the city. She dressed to stand out, enjoying the attention. Today she wore an actress hat and sunglasses, not fitting for the countryside. Honestly, I disliked her. Her hurtful remarks and belittling of our cake shop were intolerable. Being a doctor at a university hospital, she flaunted her income and education, but only when my brother Kendrick wasn't around. I was deeply annoyed by her cowardice. Boring as ever. The decor is outdated and it's dusty. Do you even clean? Michaela said, worried her fancy clothes would get dirty. I couldn't hide my annoyance and responded curtly, did you come just to say that? I just stopped by on my way to my new house. Why else would I visit such a place? She replied, looking around carelessly and picking up a cookie, placing it roughly at the register. I can't see the shop lasting, but I'll contribute to the sale since you're Kendrick's sister. She bought a mere $7 cookie with that attitude. Who could warmly welcome such a sister-in-law? If she were Kendrick's wife, I'd have her out of here immediately. As I wrapped the product, grappling with these complaints in my heart, Michaela continued her tirade. Poor Kendrick, having such a failure for a sister. He said he gave up on his own shop because of you. Her words struck my heart painfully. Kendrick had generously helped finance my shop's construction when I returned and found no support. Only Kendrick stood by me. Later, I discovered the money he used was his own saved-up capital for starting a business. If you hadn't interfered, Kendrick might have had his own shop by now. Really pishable. Then why don't you help him financially? Daniel appeared behind me and retorted sharply at Michaela, glaring at her. It's between Harmony and Kendrick, not for outsiders like us. Only Kendrick has the right to complain about Harmony. Do you even have the right to blame her? Daniel, undaunted by Michaela, confronted her. Michaela, seemingly annoyed by Daniel's audacity, furrowed her brows and removed her sunglasses with a puzzled look. Of course I have the right. That money was mine. You have no business interfering in this. The funds for Harmony's shop were from before Kendrick married you, right? If Kendrick has no complaints, why should you persistently blame Harmony? Harmony is my wife. Which husband would remain silent while his wife is being maligned? Daniel shielded me from showing my tears to Michaela. I felt reassured by his presence and grateful to be his wife. Michaela, not amused by Daniel's words, roughly grabbed the wrapped cookies from the counter and left without another word. After she left, we put up the closed sign, and Daniel embraced me. You endured well, Harmony, he said softly. I can't do this anymore. I don't have the confidence to get along with someone like her. Even if she's Kendrick's wife, I can't bear being treated this way. Are you not going to tell Kendrick? Daniel asked gently. I can't. He's already looking after Mom and Dad. I can't trouble him just because I can't get along with her. Kendrick, working as a chef in a hotel, was also taking care of our parents. Despite the long commute he managed, he had saved to open his own shop and be closer to our parents. It was with this in mind that he was saving money. Money can be earned again. I want to see you succeed as a top patissier. This money is an investment in your future. You'll definitely become famous, Kendrick assured me, investing $2 million in my startup. I was deeply grateful to Kendrick, and when he married Michaela, I was overjoyed. But I never expected her to be like this. I was tormented daily about what to do. Tomorrow we're going to Kendrick's housewarming, right? Maybe you could mention it to him. If Kendrick talks to Michaela, maybe she'll stop, Daniel suggested. Reluctantly agreeing, I focused on closing up the shop. Lately, I couldn't bring myself to tell Kendrick about Michaela. Kendrick's happiness, while he supported Mom and Dad, was precious. Despite sacrificing his own dream of opening a shop, I couldn't burden him further with Michaela's issue. I simply couldn't. The next day, Daniel and I, with a shortcake in hand, visited Kendrick's new home. Harmony and Daniel, long time no see. Glad you could make it, Kendrick welcomed us warmly at the doorstep. Michaela was out shopping and wasn't there. I felt relieved not seeing her. Noticing this, Kendrick looked at me worriedly. What's wrong? You look pale. Is it the new house smell? No way, just had a bit too much to drink with Danny last night. I forced a smile to reassure Kendrick and avoid any awkward conversation. I asked to see around the new house. Kendrick shared that apart from the tidy living room, their personal items were still in boxes. We agreed not to go upstairs as per his request. Soon, our parents arrived, and we enjoyed a rare family gathering. Then Daniel seized the opportunity to bring up yesterday's topic. Sorry to bring this up at a housewarming, but there's something about Michaela we need to discuss. Wait, Danny. I wasn't ready, I panicked, but Daniel looked at me earnestly, holding my hand. Harmony, I've seen how hard you've worked, thinking about the family, keeping your struggles to yourself. It seems unfair to Kendrick and the others. Struggles? Harmony, have you been having a hard time? Kendrick asked, his expression full of concern. Realizing I was hiding something, everyone looked worried. I regretted my foolish thought of just enduring it all. Actually, I've been harassed by Michaela for a long time, I confessed. Everyone was shocked, especially Kendrick. Knowing his wife was bullying his sister-in-law was understandably distressing. Unable to continue, Daniel explained the situation for me. A heavy silence followed, and I wondered if I should have kept quiet. That's when Kendrick, as if having made a decision, spoke to Mom. Mom, I've made up my mind. That's right, no need to hold back anymore. Daniel and I exchanged confused looks at the unexpected response. Just as we were about to ask more, we heard the front door open. I'm back. It's so hot outside. Is Kendrick not here? Michaela returned home at the worst possible time. The family's spirits dampened as if sensing the charged air of her untimely arrival. Kendrick excused himself and headed towards the entrance. Let's store the cake in the fridge for now, Daniel suggested. As Mom and I moved to do so, reaching for the fridge door, Michaela stormed into the living room. Hey, don't you touch our stuff, she shouted, startling Mom and me. I'll take care of the house. Just stay put. Fading a creepy, pleasant smile, she snatched the cake from me. Her words seemed softened, but there was an underlying sharpness, especially as she roughly took the cake. Mom, witnessing this, was speechless and unable to react, shocked by such treatment in front of her. Feeling hurt, I urged Mom to join me on the living room sofa. Sitting next to Daniel, I tried to hold back my tears. Thank you all for coming to our housewarming today, Michaela said, her tone falsely sweet. If you have gifts, you can leave them here. I'll gladly accept them, Michaela said, taking over as if she were the host. Her greedy words irritated both Daniel and me. Our parents, watching her closely, reluctantly presented their gift to Michaela. Following suit, though not keen, I handed over my gift, which Michaela snatched. What a boring gift. Typical, Michaela muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. Shocked by her audacity to complain despite receiving the gift, I felt my patience turning into anger. Then Michaela took out a bottle of disinfectant from a supermarket bag. Well then, let's wrap this up, she said, splashing the disinfectant on me. Drenched and stunned, I was speechless as my family cried out in alarm. So, I guess it's the height of the party, Michaela said, turning toward me and splashing the disinfectant again. Completely soaked, I couldn't believe the sudden turn of events. My family gasped. Hey, Michaela, what are you doing? Mom shouted, raising her voice and standing in front of me to protect me. Everyone glared at Michaela. Michaela sneered and threw her final words at me. The smell of an old lady will dirty my new house. Get out. At that moment, something inside me snapped. Silently, I stood up with a frighteningly pleasant smile and said, So you hate filth that much? Well, let me clean it up for you. After all, I built this place. Seeing me smile, Michaela seemed terrified and stepped back. I snatched all the presents from her, ignoring her complaints, and headed to the second floor. Conveniently, there was a nameplate with Michaela's name on it in front of the door, and I boldly walked inside. I picked up a cardboard box still packed and dropped it from the second floor to the first with a bang. Hey, what are you doing? Michaela tried to stop me as the boxes tumbled down one after another. With so many boxes rolling down, she couldn't come up and could only desperately scream in vain. As I dropped the last box, she yelled, Do you realize what you're doing? Michaela, showing her true colors in front of Kendrick, glared at me with a devilish face. Unconcerned, I went downstairs and asked Daniel with a smile, Can you hold back that noisy trash for me? We can't let the dirty germs out. The new house will get dirty with the smell of mold, right? Daniel must have been scared too. The words from my ever-smiling face were no longer treating Michaela as a human. I threw all her belongings outside with apparent delight. People might think I've lost my mind, and it can't be helped that they think so. Stop it, Kendrick. What are you just staring at? Stop her. Isn't your sister out of her mind? Michaela screamed desperately. However, Kendrick did not respond. Instead, he silently watched my next move. The entrance was overflowing with Michaela's cardboard boxes, a mess, but it couldn't be helped after throwing everything outside. I clapped my hands and walked towards Michaela for the final touch. Well, now it's just Michaela left. What do you mean? You think you can get away with this? She spat, her voice laced with venom. Who knows? I can't hear the threats of trash, I replied, my smile mechanical and eerie. Michaela gasped, looking at me fearfully. Without paying her any more attention, I instructed Daniel to kick her out along with her slippers. Hey, stop. No, Kendrick, help me. Michaela begged Kendrick for help, but he had no intention of listening to her. At this point, I understood what Kendrick and the others meant. There wasn't a single person on her side here. Get out if you understand. This is my house after all. What? What are you talking about? Before Michaela could finish, Daniel dragged her out, pushing her outside the entrance. He immediately closed the door, double-locked it, and even chained it. Michaela, now completely unable to enter, was left outside in the summer heat. She banged on the door and screamed for about 10 minutes, but her strength gradually waned. To make matters worse, neighbors came by and started whispering about her shabby appearance. Mommy, look, that lady is outside in her slippers, a child said, pointing. Hey, don't do that. Don't point, a parent chided, though even passing children mocked Michaela. For someone so full of pride, this public humiliation was hell. She crammed all her belongings into her car and fled the scene that day. Seeing this, I regained my composure and hastily turned to Kendrick. What should we do, Kendrick? I'm sorry, that was? It's okay, I know the situation. Besides, we should be the ones apologizing, Kendrick said gently. He suggested we go back to the living room where Mom had prepared tea and cake. I borrowed clothes from Kendrick and quickly changed to avoid catching a cold. After changing, we all sat down, trying to find some semblance of normalcy amidst the chaos. I sat on the living room sofa as Kendrick began explaining why he had been silent all this time. That woman was actually harassing Mom in the same way, he said. What? I was shocked by this sudden revelation. Daniel and I looked at Mom in surprise. It all happened when I wasn't around, Mom continued. She constantly harassed and mocked me, even made fun of you. It was really terrible. Michaela had been bad-mouthing you every time we met, suggesting that your poor upbringing was due to my bad parenting. She claimed that if we had more money, Kendrick wouldn't have had to struggle. That's what I confessed to Kendrick yesterday. Kendrick nodded. Mom told me everything, and I decided that since you built the house, we should explain the situation to you and your family before deciding what to do next. That's what led to today. Michaela, who even tormented Mom, could never be forgiven. Trembling with anger, I clenched my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. Seeing this, Daniel gently placed his hand over mine. Harmony, I know how much you care about family. Maybe you don't have to endure this anymore, Daniel said softly. After hearing all this, I definitely can't go on with her either, I said, my resolve solidifying. Inspired by Kendrick's determination, I steeled myself to teach Michaela a lesson. We pledged to act, and the next day, my phone was flooded with a storm of calls from Michaela, Kendrick, Daniel, and I decided to meet her alone. What do you mean by kicking me out of the house? You won't get away with what you did. Michaela's shrill voice echoed as she entered my office. Wearing the same clothes as yesterday, with dark circles under her eyes from lack of sleep, she looked miserable. Her loud voice was irritating, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I smiled sweetly, further infuriating her with my words. I cleaned up because you said the new house gets dirty, right? What? I don't want someone as ugly as you in the house. The new house will get dirty with germs, right? I said, putting my index finger to my lips, feigning cuteness. As unsuitable as it felt for me, it seemed to affect Michaela. Her face turned red as a boiled lobster, showing her anger. Who's ugly? I'm far more beautiful than a third-rate woman like you, she spat. To say that with the same clothes as yesterday and such a dirty face. Impressive, I replied, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Whose fault do you think it is that I ended up like this? Michaela retorted, doubling down on her previous provocations. A woman like you, acting all high and mighty, I said, meeting her gaze steadily. The tension in the room was palpable, and I knew there was no turning back now. I taunted Michaela, which angered her enough to lunge at me. Daniel quickly stood protectively in front of me, and Kendrick, usually mild-mannered, showed his anger for the first time. Enough. You're in no position to talk down to Harmony and her family, he said firmly. Why should I be the one getting scolded? The bad one is clearly that woman. Michaela remained defiant, even against Kendrick's words. She must have looked down on Kendrick as well. Deep down, she was after money, blaming me for losing it and despising me despite having her own earnings. Her greed was despicable. As I glared at her with utter contempt, Kendrick slammed a piece of paper in front of her. I have no intention of going on with someone who can't even value my family. We're getting a divorce. The paper Kendrick presented was a divorce petition already signed by him and our father as a guarantor. Seeing this, Michaela suddenly regained her composure and clung to Kendrick in a panic. Wait, a divorce? Just wait. I don't want to hear what you have to say. My mind is made up, and if you refuse the divorce, I'll go to court if I have to. Where do you think the money for that will come from? You don't have the financial power, so don't talk big. I'll support you financially, so don't worry. Michaela tried to act humble, but Kendrick's words revealed her true nature again. Now that we had proof of her looking down on Kendrick financially, we could crush her without remorse. Smiling, I intervened between them. Didn't you know? Besides this store, I have several others. Michaela looked at me, confusion and desperation in her eyes. She was trying to comprehend what she had just heard, but I didn't give her a chance to respond. You thought you could manipulate Kendrick for his money? You thought wrong. Her face turned pale as the realization of her situation set in. The tables had turned, and she knew it. Kendrick, Daniel, and I stood united, and there was no way she could worm her way out of this. Kendrick gently but firmly pushed Michaela away from him. It's over, Michaela. Leave and don't come back. Defeated, Michaela had no choice but to leave. As she walked out, her once arrogant demeanor was replaced with a sense of utter defeat. We watched her go, feeling the sense of relief and closure. Turning back to Kendrick and Daniel, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Thank you, I said, my voice filled with gratitude. Kendrick smiled warmly. We're family, we protect each other. I have enough financial power to fight you, I said, causing Michaela to gasp in surprise. A TV show had previously featured one of my regular customers praising my shop. The reporter raved about its beauty and deliciousness, leading to its popularity. Requests for more stores came flooding in, and now I have a nationwide chain. Kendrick was the only one who supported the opening of my shop. As a thank you, I gifted him that house. I had also heard about your plans to open a clinic nearby and thought you'd need money. Michaela's face turned pale upon hearing the whole situation. She must have realized she'd picked a fight with the wrong person. She was speechless. Since I still hold the property rights, I am the owner of that house. I can sue you for trespassing. What will you do? Will you fight? With a smile, I cornered Michaela, who seemingly gave in and began to profusely apologize. Even though Michaela continued to apologize, our family had no intention of forgiving her, and we kicked her out of the store. Kendrick and Michaela eventually went to court for a divorce. Given everything that had happened, our lawyer assured us that the divorce would be granted. Our family savored this victory. During the time she was kicked out, Michaela's face became well known in the neighborhood, and no one was sympathetic towards her. Her clinic had no patients and closed within 3 months. She shamefully fled the town. Thus, our family found peace. I continued managing my shops, and Kendrick finally opened his own. Kendrick, Dad, and Mom started living in the new house, which we remodeled for accessibility. Harmony, what happened? You suddenly went quiet, a neighbor asked, snapping me back to reality during a tea party. Sorry, it's nothing. I'm just really grateful to those kids, I responded. Thanks to them, I'm now enjoying a peaceful retirement with my husband. As we enjoyed the cake, I reflected on how these nearly 40 years were the stepping stones to my current happiness.